By first light, Wade Preston was already outside, breath smoking in the dark, maul rising and falling in a rhythm older than thought. Cedar rounds split clean when the grain was honest, Fir argued. Larch twisted and punished your wrists if you rushed it. At 61, Wade didn't rush much anymore. His cabin sat above the Elk River break where the slope canted hard toward black water and basalt, a cedar plank rectangle with a corrugated roof that sang when sleet came in sideways. 40 miles from the nearest grocery if Highway 12 stayed clear, longer if rockfall dropped in. No cell bars most days unless he stood on the propane tank and held the phone north like an offering. The porch listed 3 inches to starboard. The old hound, June, slept there anyway, one cloudy eye cracked open whenever he crossed the boards. Every morning was the same because sameness held things together. Wood first, then stove, then coffee through a dented enamel filter, then a short walk to the spring box to swap out yesterday's bucket. He'd check the line where elk shouldered through the wire fence and bent the staples loose, check the 2 game cameras on the ridge trail, and write weather in block letters in the same green field journal he used to carry on wildfire lines. Wind, temp, cloud base, precipitation, bird activity. He no longer had to do any of it for pay. He did it because there was no one left to ask him if he had. 7 years had passed since the night Lorna died at his kitchen table, with one hand still on a dish towel. The medevac could not find their road in freezing rain and rotor wash. Dispatch had asked him 3 times to repeat the address, like the mountain might move if he said it louder. By the time the pilot found the power line corridor, she was gone, and Wade had learned exactly how long 15 minutes could be. Now her photograph, sun-faded at the edges, was taped above the sink. Sometimes he spoke to it without noticing. "North wind coming," he'd say, rinsing beans. Or, "Fence held this time." Sometimes he noticed and felt stupid. Sometimes he didn't care. What he had, what had stayed with him when muscle left and friends moved downslope, was attention. Patient, unsentimental attention. He noticed where the grass laid flat against itself for no reason. He noticed when jays went loud in one drainage and silent in another. He noticed a new scent in wet air before rain made it vanish. The trick, learned over 3 decades tracking smoke, weather, and frightened people through bad country, was to look long before you named what you saw. On that late October day, the light never really arrived. A ceiling of pewter sat low over the ridge, and sleet began before noon, thin needles ticking on the metal roof. Wade patched the lower fence line with gloved hands gone stiff at the knuckles, then climbed to camera 2 above the alder notch. The SD card held 3 mule deer, 1 fox, and a branch whipping itself useless in wind. Nothing unusual. He logged it in the journal anyway. By 4:30, dusk had swallowed the trees whole. Wade fed June, banked the stove, and stepped out onto the porch with binoculars because the weather had that uneasy feel. Sound traveling wrong, the river too loud and too far at the same time. Highway 12 cut a pale scar through timber below him, half hidden by brush, and a dirt cutbank where spring floods ate away at the shoulder. That was when he saw it moving at the tree line. At first he thought logger. Someone hurt, maybe. It was on 2 legs, broad in the chest, dark with rain and mud. It lurched once and braced a hand on a fir trunk. Then it kept going, fast for something carrying weight. Over one arm hung something limp and pale-bellied. Wade lifted the binoculars and felt his scalp tighten. Too much shoulder, arms too long, head wrong in shape, sloped and high at the rear. No cap, no rain shell, no blaze orange in hunting season. The hide, or hair, if that's what it was, lay plastered in black ropes from sleet. The thing crossed a gap in the alders in 3 strides, dropped behind the cutbank near the highway, and vanished. June, on the porch behind him, gave a low, uncertain whine and went quiet. Wade stayed still another 10 seconds, because motion could lie and stillness usually didn't. Nothing came back into view. No shout, no truck doors, no headlights stopping. He went inside and picked up the landline. It still worked when weather didn't peel the wire off the pole. He punched 911. Emergency services. I need a deputy on Highway 12 near mile marker 42, north side cutbank, below the Elk Break access road, Wade said. His own voice sounded remote, like he was hearing it through static. I've got a... He stopped, chose words. A hairy man, maybe injured, moving fast, carrying something that looked like a body. A pause, keys tapping. Sir, can you repeat that? A what? Big male, bipedal, dark hair or mud. No clothing. Went behind the cutbank. Could be a person in bad condition. Could be assault. Need someone now. Sir, what's your name? Wade Preston. Another pause. Mr. Preston, are you currently at your residence? Yes. Have you consumed alcohol today? Wade stared at the sink, at Lorna's photo soft with age. No. We've had multiple prank reports of, quote, wild men in that area from hunting parties this month. Is this related to... This is not a prank, Wade said, and heard the steel edge come into his own tone. I tracked fire for 30 years. I know what a man looks like. Send a car. Units are tied up on a vehicle rollover west of Calder. I'm entering this as a possible transient disturbance. If there is immediate threat to life, shelter in place, and avoid contact. I just reported immediate threat. Someone will swing through when available. The line clicked dead with professional politeness. Wade stood there with the receiver in his hand long enough for dial tone to turn to warning beeps. Then he put on his rain shell, grabbed the rifle from the mudroom, and drove the old Tacoma down the rutted track toward the highway. Sleet turned to wet snow halfway down. Headlights showed white threads and nothing else. He parked behind the cutbank and moved on foot, beam low, boots sliding in clay. The place smelled of iron and wet fur. He found drag marks first, 2 parallel furrows heading from road shoulder into alder shadow, as if something heavy had been hauled by one arm. Then blood on shale. Not droplets, a broad smear where weight had rested. 20 yards in, the body was a deer carcass, half-grown, throat torn open, hindquarters opened with rough efficiency. Fresh, steam still rising from cavities into the cold. No human remains, no camp, no tracks he could trust. The ground was churned by runoff and sleet. But on a slick clay shelf under one root tangle there was an impression that made him crouch and hold his light closer. Long, 5 forward toe marks splayed wide, heel deep. Not hoof, not boot. Could have been ruined by water into anything except it wasn't. Something about the midsection bowed with pressure and release like a foot that flexed where a human arch would. By the time the deputy arrived, Wade's gloves were soaked through and his jaw hurt from clenching. The cruiser rolled up with wipers slapping and high beams too bright. Deputy Kramer, Wade knew him by sight, county kid, 30 maybe, stepped out already annoyed at the weather. He listened, shined his own light on the deer, and gave a short breath through his nose. Looks like a lion kill got dragged by scavengers, Kramer said. Or somebody dumped roadkill to mess with folks. Lions don't make tracks like that, Wade said, pointing. Kramer glanced. That's washout and imagination, Mr. Preston. You called me a prank before you got here. I didn't call you anything. Dispatch logged suspicious activity. I came. Wade looked at him. You asked if I was drunk. Kramer shifted, uncomfortable for half a second, then tucked it under procedure. I'm going to advise you not to pursue unknown persons in the dark, And please stay off the emergency line unless there's a real emergency. We've got limited units and real calls waiting." Wade laughed once without humor, a sound like a cough. "What part of possible assault sounded fake to you?" Kramer's voice flattened. "No victim, no suspect. Dead deer in bad weather. Go home, lock up. If you see a transient on your property, call non-emergency." He drove off, taillights swallowed by sleet. Wade stood in the beam of his own flashlight until snow began to fill the drag marks. By the next morning, he had replayed the scene enough times to doubt every edge of it, except one. Whatever he saw had moved with purpose and strength no injured man would have had. He replaced camera 2 with a fresh card and added a third lower on the game trail, where the alders pinched into a narrow run. He didn't tell anybody. There wasn't anybody to tell that would listen. The first new image came 2 nights later at 2:13 a.m. A frame of rain streak and ghost blur, then one usable shot. An arm entering from left, long beyond normal proportion, knotted with muscle under wet, dark hair. No hand visible. Height impossible to judge without full body. But the camera, mounted 7 feet up, caught only from elbow down. He printed it at the library printer in town, black and white, grainy as old newspaper. He drove to the sheriff's annex and left it with the woman at the front desk. She looked at it, looked at him, and gave the same thin smile people used at funerals and conspiracy meetings. "We'll pass it on," she said. No one called. 3 days later, one of his bait stations came up stripped clean again. Sardine tins licked bare, chicken wire peeled back, trap untouched. Something had reached around the mechanism without springing it. Wade reset it with gloves, circled downwind, and found another impression in damp loam where seep water held shape. Longer than his forearm from heel to toe. 17 inches if it was 1 inch. The midfoot showed a soft collapse he had only ever seen in old photocopied reports he and other young trackers used to laugh about on fire camp nights when the bourbon came out, and someone mentioned monsters. He took photos with a ruler and called in again. The deputy on phone duty sighed audibly before he finished. "Mr. Preston, wildlife already advised this is black bear activity. Black bears don't have 5 forward toes and a pressure ridge through the midfoot. Sir, with respect, we are not opening a cryptid investigation." "This isn't about folklore," Wade said. "You've got something big habituating to people and scavenging close to road. Somebody's going to chase it and get hurt. Then don't feed internet folklore and we won't have armed tourists in your timber." The line went quiet. That afternoon at Whitlow's feed, 2 men in camo were laughing by the mineral blocks, one of them pantomiming a gorilla walk while the other filmed on his phone. Near the counter, a school bus driver Wade recognized from the valley route was speaking in a tight voice to the owner. "Crossed right in front of me at dawn," she said. "Naked giant. I'm telling you what I saw." The owner nodded without committing either way, eyes darting toward other customers. Fear and mockery were breeding together, and Wade knew that species. He'd seen it on wildfire perimeters when rumor outran maps. Someone hears spot fire, someone else hears town gone, and suddenly roads clog with pickups and good intentions and rifles and bad information. Panic did what flames sometimes couldn't. Back home, he wrote in the field journal longer than usual. October 29th, calls dismissed. Tracks repeat. Bait removed without trigger. Public chatter increasing. Risk not attack pattern. Risk is people. Armed volunteers if rumor spikes. Night visibility poor. Terrain unstable near old lookout corridor. If pursuit starts there, someone dies in slide or crossfire. He closed the book and sat in the kitchen while the stove ticked and settled. June snored under the table. Outside, rain came down in steady sheets, washing sign from mud and leaving only what stone could hold. Wade looked up at Lorna's photograph. "They're going to make this worse," he said softly. In the dark beyond the porch light, something knocked once against the far fence, wood on wire, heavy and deliberate, then moved off without another sound. Wade froze on the porch step, head tilted, listening for the follow-up sound that usually told you species. Hoof scrape, branch rake, breath, claws on wire. Nothing. Rain hissed through fir needles. The river rolled below like distant traffic. June had gone rigid behind him, lips tight, not barking, which unsettled him more than noise would have. He took the flashlight from the hook and clicked it on low. "Stay," he told the hound, then stepped off the porch into mud that sucked at his boots. The beam swept across the near fence, then the gate, then the dark wedge where the path dropped toward the alder line. At the far corner post, 30 yards out, the top wire had been pushed down and sprung back. Fresh shine on the staple. Not broken, not elk either. Elk leaned and tangled, left hair and panic. This was one shove measured, enough to test the give. Wade crouched and touched the wire. Still trembling, almost too slight to feel. He lifted the beam higher. A smear of wet on the cedar post, dark in the rain. Could have been mud, could have been anything. By the time he got gloves and a sample bag, the weather had washed it clean. He stood there until cold seeped through his collar and into his neck. Whatever had made the knock had chosen to announce itself, then leave. Not hunting, not fleeing, checking. By dawn, sleet had turned to hard rain and erased half the mountain's memory. Wade moved anyway because routine was not comfort now. It was control. He checked camera 1 on the upper ridge. Deer, raccoon, wind. Camera 2 gave him 2 black frames at 1:07 a.m. Then a burst at 1:08. First, rain-white static. Second, a shoulder crossing too close to focus, matted and dark. Third, nothing but an eye-shine pair high in frame. Too high for black bear at that angle, too level for elk. Camera 3, set at the alder pinch, gave him the piece that tightened his chest. A half-profile in motion. Conical crown, neck buried in trapezius muscle, left arm bent around weight outside frame. Timestamp 1:11 a.m. He swapped cards, sealed them in a freezer bag, and wrote times in the field journal with exactness that felt like prayer. When he drove into town, he printed stills again and added 1 page of notes. Camera heights, distances, compass orientation, weather conditions. He left copies at the sheriff's annex and, this time, at Fish and Wildlife. The wildlife officer called him back near supper, voice polite and tired. "Mr. Preston, looked at your prints. We see probable bear with mange, maybe standing posture due to bait source." "No bear has a sagittal crest like that," Wade said. A pause. "You can't confirm that from grainy trail cam images." "I can confirm proportion." "What I can confirm," the officer said, tone narrowing, "is folks are driving up from 3 counties looking for a monster. If you keep circulating this, somebody's going to shoot a hiker." "Then tell them there's something large using those drainages and to stay out. We are advising caution for normal wildlife activity." Normal. Wade thanked him and hung up before he said something useless. That night, he reset his bait station with changes. Second wire loop, side trigger, and a dusting of sifted flour under overhang where rain couldn't reach. Old tracker tricks. Not because he wanted to trap whatever this was, he didn't, but because sign beat arguments. At 3:40 a.m., June gave 1 warning woof and fell silent. Wade sat upright in bed, listened, heard a light metallic click from the lower drawer where the station sat. At first light, he went down and found the sardines gone, trap unsprung, and flour disturbed by partial pressure marks. Front edge of a foot, toe pads deep, then absence, as if the rest of the step had been placed deliberately on stones. It had learned the trigger. Maybe on first contact. Maybe before. He followed sign for 40 minutes until the slope turned to broken basalt and Devil's Club, then lost it where runoff braided through moss. On a cedar snag shoulder high, he found 2 short dark hairs snagged in sap and bagged them too. By noon, he had a map on his table. Notches, creek cuts, old fire roads and red pencil marks showing each sighting, each camera hit, each disturbed station. The pattern bent away from occupied houses and toward the abandoned lookout corridor above the washout. Travel with intent to avoid people, not a random raider, a route. He called non-emergency, asked for Deputy Kramer, got voicemail, left coordinates and a plain request. Please keep armed civilians out of Sector 9 timber above Elk Break. Terrain unstable, unknown large animal moving through. No return call. On Friday, Whitlow's feed sold out of rifle rounds by noon. Wade only needed salt blocks and dog kibble, but he stood in line long enough to hear 2 teenagers brag about bagging Bigfoot for TikTok. Hear an older man say he and his cousins were running thermals at first dark. Hear the bus driver again, pale and furious, insisting she'd nearly put 30 kids into a ditch when that thing crossed at the bend. When Wade stepped outside, he found 2 trucks parked door to door, tailgates down, men in orange caps loading spotlights and coolers. One of them recognized him. "Hey, mountain man," he called. "You the one seeing hairy people?" Wade kept his tone flat. "You planning to hunt near the washout?" "Planning to look." In that corridor, 1 false step and you slide 30 feet into rock. In rain, more. The man grinned. "Appreciate safety lecture, Smokey Bear." Another chimed in. "Don't worry, we shoot downhill." They laughed. Wade didn't. He looked at each face hard enough to be remembered, then drove home with a headache pulsing behind his right eye. At dusk, engines climbed the ridge road that should have been empty this late in weather. He killed his porch light and watched beams sweep tree trunks like prison searchlights. Once, around 9, he heard 2 quick shots from far off, then shouting, then silence. No sirens came. In the morning, he found boot prints across his lower meadow and a crushed beer can by his spring box. Somebody had cut his private road/no access sign clean through with broadheads. He picked up the can with gloved fingers and set it on the porch rail, staring at it a long time. The creature hadn't crossed his threshold. People had. Deputy Erin Vale arrived just after noon on Sunday in a county SUV mud splashed to the mirrors. Wade recognized at once she was new. Uniform too crisp in the seams. Duty belt still sitting high like it hadn't taught her hips where to carry weight yet. Mid-20s maybe. Alert eyes, not tired ones. She stepped out, removed her campaign hat against the rain, and introduced herself before he could speak. "Deputy Erin Vale. Sheriff asked me to follow up on rumor control in this sector." "Rumor control," Wade repeated. Her mouth tightened as if she heard the same phrase every hour and hated it a little more each time. "I'd like to look at what you've collected, if you're willing." Wade studied her face for mockery and didn't find any, just caution. He let her in. She stood at the kitchen table while he laid out stills, print photos, bagged hairs, measurements, and journal entries. She didn't interrupt much. Asked practical questions, camera model, timestamp drift, exact locations, whether anyone else had access to his land. When he showed the 17-inch impression photo with ruler, she frowned and leaned close. Could this be 2 overlapping tracks? Possible, Wade said, but pressure depth says single load on wet loam. See the heel compression? Then release through mid-foot. She glanced up. You've done this a while. Tracking? 30 years fire and search. I don't chase ghost stories. She nodded once, then surprised him by saying, I know. Outside, June growled low at something downslope, then settled. Erin looked toward the door. Look, off record? I don't think you're making this up. But my office is under pressure. We've got volunteers out with rifles, social media claiming missing hikers, and dispatch getting hammered with calls about giants in every tree line. There are no missing hikers tied to this, Wade said. Exactly. But panic doesn't care. She tapped the printout of his map. Can you walk me through this route on foot? Tonight, I need enough to shut down the weekend warrior hunts with something other than trust us. Wade hesitated. Tonight in this weather, you'll get hurt in that corridor. Then we don't go there, we do your lower loop. He looked at the rain, at her, at the stack of evidence nobody wanted to own. Fine, after dark, less civilian traffic. She exhaled, almost relief. I'll be back at 2100. As she left, he noticed the red recording light on the Bodycam clipped to her vest, steady even in rain. Protocol, he thought, or insurance. By 9:07 p.m., rain had thinned to mist, and the temperature dropped enough to edge puddles with skin ice. Wade and Erin moved single file along the lower trail, lights hooded, steps deliberate on root-slick dirt. June stayed at heel despite every instinct to range ahead. Erin breathed quietly through her nose, trying not to sound winded on the climbs. She carried her rifle slung and hands free, a choice Wade marked in her favor. At the alder pinch, he crouched and pointed to a fresh depression under fern fronds. Here, left foot plant, see toe spread. Erin knelt beside him. Her body cam clicked faintly as autofocus shifted. Jesus, she whispered before catching herself. Sorry. Don't name it yet, Wade murmured. Just log it. They moved another 100 yards to where the trail widened near a fallen spruce. Something smelled wrong there. Wet hide, old blood, and musk, sharp as ammonia. June stopped dead, hackles up, and gave a trembling whine. Wade lifted one hand, palm back. Halt. From ahead came a sound like someone pulling a soaked tarp across brush. Heavy, controlled. Then one branch flexed and returned. Erin's light twitched toward it. Wade covered her lens with 2 fingers for a beat, then angled it lower to keep glare off their faces. Easy, he whispered. The shape stepped out at 30 yards. At first it was all mass and rain-dark texture, too large for the eye to process in pieces. Then details locked in, shoulders broad as a barn door, chest rising and falling in deep, labouring draws, hair hanging in ropes from neck to thigh, head peaked toward the rear with little visible forehead. Left leg carried stiff, favouring the right with each shift. Over one forearm hung a deer, hind legs downward, throat wound crusted black. Not a person, not a costume. No seams, no fabric, no human gait hidden in it. Flesh and weight and breath in cold air. Erin made a sound that was almost a gasp and almost a curse. The bodycam's red light stayed steady. The creature turned its head toward them. Eyes caught light for an instant, amber, reflective, set deep. It did not charge. It did not vocalize. It just watched, every muscle loaded to leave. Wade realized his rifle was half raised from reflex. He forced himself to lower the muzzle until it pointed at dirt, slow enough to be read. Easy, he said, voice low and even, the same tone he'd used talking panicked sawyers off a fire line edge. Nobody's taking your food. Beside him, Erin mirrored the movement and lowered her own weapon. For 3 long breaths, nothing changed. Then the creature shifted weight, winced, clear hitch in the left leg, stepped to a patch of open ground and set the deer down gently, almost deliberately, as if to free both hands. It took 2 backward steps into alder shadow without breaking eye contact. Wade saw then what the dark on its thigh was. Not just rain. Blood, partly washed, matting hair over what might have been a gash. It backed once more, turned with startling smoothness for something that big. and vanished into timber with 3 quiet strides that seemed impossible for that mass. The forest swallowed it. No crash, no thrash, just gone. Only when it was fully out of sight did Erin let herself breathe loud. "Tell me my camera got that," she said, voice shaking. "It got it," Wade said. His own hands were steady only by discipline. Inside, everything felt tilted. All of it. She looked at him, rain beading on her lashes. That was carrying a deer, not a person. Yeah. Wade stared at the place it had stood. "First night I called it in, I said maybe carrying a body." He heard his own words from dispatch, sharp and certain. Wrong in one key way: food, not victim. June pressed against his leg, trembling. Erin touched the Bodycam once, as if to confirm it was real. "If this gets out tonight, we'll have 50 men up here by dawn." "If it doesn't get out," Wade said, "they'll keep saying it's a joke and send the same 50 men anyway." They made it back to the cabin in silence, broken only by wet brush against rain shells. On the porch, Erin radioed in with clipped professionalism. "Sector check complete. No civilian contact. Returning to unit." She did not mention what they saw on open channel. Inside, she replayed the Bodycam on his table. Grainy in motion, but unmistakable at the clear point where the creature stepped broadside and the deer swung into frame. Timestamp. GPS ping. Audio of their voices. Evidence no one could laugh off without lying outright. Erin swallowed hard. "I have to log this." "They'll bury it," Wade said. She didn't deny it. Maybe, maybe not. He watched her export a backup to secure drive protocol, then, after a long hesitation, copy a second encrypted file to a thumb drive from her pocket, quick and guilty and very deliberate. She met his eyes when she did it. "Chain of custody," she said, almost daring him to call it what it was. Or survival. She clipped the drive inside her vest and stood. At the door, she paused. "Mr. Preston, Wade, until we know what command does, keep your lights low and don't engage civilians. If anybody organizes a hunt, call me direct." She wrote a cell number on the back of a feed receipt. "It'll have service near your propane tank, right?" "Usually." She pulled her hat back on and stepped into mist. "You were right about one thing," she said over her shoulder. "Main danger isn't that animal." After her tail lights disappeared, Wade sat at the table with the paused frame glowing on his old monitor. 8 feet of wet, breathing muscle, and a wounded deer hanging from its arm, eyes fixed on him with something like exhausted caution. Not myth, not man, and not the threat people were about to become. He closed the laptop, took out his field journal, and wrote one line in block letters so hard the pen nearly tore paper. Observation. No longer sufficient. The pen was still in his hand when his cell buzzed from the windowsill. 1 bar, then none, then one again. Unknown number. He stepped onto the propane tank platform to catch signal and answered into cold mist. "Wade, it's Erin. Don't talk long. I'm on encrypted but not private." Her voice was tight, words clipped flat to hide what sat behind them. "You logged it?" he asked. "I logged a contact with an unidentified large subject and attached Bodycam file." A beat. Within 20 minutes, Lieutenant Halverson pulled me into command, took the camera, and reassigned the call code to nuisance wildlife pending review. They burying it? They already started. It flagged my supplemental notes as speculative language. I was told to rewrite as possible bear misidentification under poor light. Wade gripped the phone harder. And the video? Locked. Access restricted to command staff. Rain popped on the propane lid under his boots. Listen carefully. They're pushing a rumor-controlled bulletin in the morning. No credible evidence, no threat. Avoid trespassing. That sounds fine on paper, but Pike's also briefing trusted community volunteers to run Eyes in the Timber. Armed? She didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Unofficially, yes. Wade looked out toward the black ridge where the alder pinch disappeared into cloud. That's a hunt. I know. A crackle chewed half a second of silence. Then Erin said, quieter, they also used your name in the room. Preston sees things. Grief history. Isolation. They're setting you up as the cautionary example. The old humiliation flared in him, hot and familiar. Dispatch asking if he'd been drinking while Lorna cooled on his kitchen floor. So if somebody gets shot, they can pin panic on the old widower. Yeah. Her breath hitched once, recovered. Keep your head down tonight. I'll call when I can. The line dropped. By 7 the next morning, the bulletin was posted on the county page and screenshot across local Facebook groups before coffee cooled in mugs. No verified threat in Elk Break sector. Reports attributed to misidentified wildlife/social media rumors. Trespass enforcement will be strict. Under it, comments multiplied by the minute, half mocked, half dared each other to go prove the county was hiding something. Someone had posted Wade's road entrance from satellite view with a laughing emoji, and the caption, "Ask this guy, he talks to Bigfoot." By 9, 2 pickups were parked at the mouth of his private track. When Wade drove down to move them, the drivers filmed him through cracked windows, phones held up like badges. "Tell us where the giant is, old man," one called. "Get off my road." "We're on county shoulder." "Then stay there and keep your rifles cased." They smiled, not agreeing, and stayed until noon. That afternoon, Deputy Kramer came alone, hat brim low against rain, a folded form in hand. Not hostile, not friendly either. "Got complaints you threatened visitors with a firearm." "I warned trespassers off posted land." Kramer held up the paper. "This is an advisory. Given ongoing public disturbance, department requests you refrain from armed contact with civilians unless immediate self-defense." Wade took the form, scanned it. Carefully neutral language, all liability, no ownership. "You advised me to call if there was danger. I call, you dismiss it. Now you tell me not to carry on my own property. I'm telling you tensions are high. You helping raise them." Kramer's jaw worked. For a second, Wade thought he might say something human. Instead, "If you have concerns, call command." He turned back to the cruiser. "Kramer," Wade said. The deputy paused. "You got kids on that bus route?" Kramer frowned. "What?" "Because this doesn't stay rumor forever. It ends with somebody bleeding." Kramer got in and drove off without answering. By dusk, Wade's lower fence had been cut in 2 places. Camera 1 was gone from its tree, strap sliced clean. Camera 3 lay smashed under a boot print near the Alder Trail, SD card missing. June found it first and stood over the wreckage, growling into the brush. What Wade had built for 7 years, routine, boundaries, the careful distance between his life and everyone else's noise, was being stripped apart by people who kept saying they were trying to keep order. He spent an hour repairing fence in rain, hands clumsy with anger. At full dark, he sat at the kitchen table, map open, and circled the remaining camera location twice in red. One eye left on the mountain. He and Erin agreed by text at 11:13 p.m. Meet at the old gravel pull-out before dawn, run quick, pull surviving evidence, avoid roads. Wade was there early, truck lights off. Erin arrived 5 minutes late in an unmarked county rig, uniform under a plain rain shell, bodycam absent. "You okay?" he asked as she got out. "Got written up for procedural language and removed from field contact pending review." She shut the door too hard. "I'm not okay." They moved fast up the drainage with headlamps hooded red. At camera 2's tree, the trunk was bare. Damn it. Wade scanned for cut strap, screws, any dropped fragment. Nothing. Not theft for gear, theft for record. They split 10 yards apart and combed leaf litter. Erin found one snapped mounting buckle. Wade found a fresh cigarette butt, ground into mud, and a thermal battery wrapper from a consumer scope brand he'd seen in town yesterday. Civilian hunters had been here first. Plan B, Erin said. Track movement and close access with hazard order. We can still do that if I push state geotech on washout risk. Do it now. She stepped onto a rock, lifted phone overhead for signal, and dialed twice. No connection. She swore softly, then tried radio through the county channel she still had access to. Dispatch, Unit Vale requesting supervisor relay for emergency slope closure at Lookout Spur. Potential mass casualty. Static. Then a male voice Wade didn't recognize. Unit Vale, you are currently non-deployable. Return to station and cease independent operations. Erin went still. Dispatch, copy immediate hazard recommendation. This is public safety. Unit Vale, acknowledge and return. She keyed off without replying. Wade looked at her. They're listening to your channel now. Yeah. He felt a cold, practical dread settle where anger had been. We need to pull people out ourselves. They started down toward the spur road to post handwritten slide warnings on trees and gateposts, anything that might make even one hothead pause. At the second bend, engine noise rose below them. 3 ATVs, lights off, climbed the closed spur in single file. Men in camo. Long guns across handlebars. Wade stepped into the track and raised both hands. Erin beside him, badge visible. Road's unstable, Wade shouted. Turn around. Lead rider throttled down 10 feet away. Who says? I do. Worked this slope 30 years. You break crust above the washout it goes. The rider spat to the side. Sheriff volunteer detail, old man. We got permission. Erin snapped. From who? Pike. She stepped closer. There is no sanctioned armed detail. You are trespassing into an active hazard zone. He grinned in her flashlight beam. Then arrest us, deputy. Oh, wait. The other two laughed. Wade saw one rider's finger resting inside the trigger guard and felt his pulse jump. Back up, he said to Erin, low. She held position a beat too long, then moved. The ATVs idled forward until Wade had to step off the track or get clipped. They passed, mud spraying his pant leg, and kept climbing towards the lookout corridor. Erin keyed her radio again, voice hard now. Dispatch, 3 unauthorized armed riders entering closed spur above Elk Break. Probable negligent discharge risk. Request immediate intercept. Silence. Then, Unit Vale, stand down. The ATV's taillights vanished in trees. Wade stood in the churned mud, breathing through his teeth. Their plan, document, warn, close the route, had failed in real time. People were already above them with guns, and the only authority nearby was choosing not to act. June, left at the cabin for safety, began barking in the distance, frantic and continuous. Wade's head snapped toward home. That's not normal bark. They ran down slope, branches whipping faces. By the time they reached the yard, barking had cut off. The porch light swung on one hinge, shot out. A side window was shattered inward. Inside, drawers hung open and dumped. Map tube split, his field journal gone from the table. On the floor near the sink, June lay on her side, conscious but shaking, flank bloodied by a shallow furrow from shoulder to rib. Not a bite, too straight. Grazed by a bullet through the window. Wade dropped to his knees so fast his bad hip screamed. Hey, girl, hey, stay with me. His hands moved automatically to pressure, gauze tape from the stock kit. June licked once at his wrist, eyes clouded with pain. Erin was already on her phone, voice breaking protocol and not caring. Officer down equivalent. Animal hit, unlawful entry, firearm discharge at occupied residence. Elk break access now. Send somebody now. No one came for 42 minutes. By then, June was bandaged and sedated on half-dose from old livestock meds Wade prayed were close enough. By then, rain had washed the boot prints on the porch and thinned the blood spatter at the sill into pink threads down cedar planks. A deputy finally arrived, took photos, wrote notes and said, "Could be accidental round from hunters below." Wade stared at him until the younger man looked away. After the cruiser left, the cabin felt wrong. Air broken, edges violated. Wade sat on the floor beside June, back against the stove, rifle across his knees, and no certainty left except this. Waiting for institutions to handle it had cost him blood, evidence, and whatever safety remained. Near midnight, Erin stood outside her own apartment building in Calder, with her forehead against the cold window of her parked SUV, engine ticking down. She should go upstairs, sleep 2 hours, show up for discipline review, looking composed. Instead, she sat in the dark and let her hands shake. The formal notice lay on the passenger seat. Administrative hold. Duty weapon. Temporarily surrendered. No unsupervised field contact. She laughed once at that, too tired to make it sound like anything but hurt. Her phone lit with 3 unread texts from her mother asking if she'd visit Sunday dinner, one from a patrol friend saying, "Heard you stepped in it," and one unsent draft to Wade that began, "I'm sorry about June," and went nowhere. In the windshield reflection, she looked younger than she felt, like a kid in costume, not a deputy who was supposed to hold lines when everyone else blurred them. She thought of the creature backing away with that deer, not charging. She thought of men on ATVs smiling while they lied about permission. She thought of command voices flattening reality into paperwork, because paperwork could be defended in court. When she was 13, she'd called 911 for her father and gotten put on hold while dispatch rerouted for a highway pileup. Not negligence exactly. Triage. By the time EMS reached their trailer, his heart had stopped on linoleum. People told her for years that no one was to blame, that systems were strained, that mountain response times were what they were. Maybe that was true. It still carved something out of her. She had joined up anyway because she believed somebody in the chain could choose not to look away when inconvenient facts showed up wet and breathing in front of them. Tonight, she had watched that belief crack. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She pressed her palms to her eyes until sparks came. "Don't do this in a parking lot," she muttered to herself, and then did it anyway. Silent tears she would have denied under oath. When it passed, she opened the glove box, took out the thumb drive, and held it between finger and thumb like it might burn her. If she leaked it now, she could lose her badge, pension, maybe catch charges. If she didn't, men with rifles would keep flooding those ridges under the shelter of official shrugging. And Wade, stubborn, grieving Wade with his block-letter journals and impossible patience, would keep standing between panic and gunfire, with less and less to stand on. She typed, deleted, typed again, then finally sent him, "I can't fix command tonight, but I'm not out. Call me if movement heads toward Lookout Spur. I mean any time." Then she drove back out of town instead of going upstairs, parked on a dark turnout with 1 bar of service, and watched scanner traffic scroll on a volunteer app she was no longer supposed to access. At 2:18 a.m., she whispered into the empty cab, "Please nobody be stupid." At 2:22, someone was. Wade had not slept. June dozed fitfully by the stove, breath shallow but steady. He sat at the table redrawing his stolen map from memory, drainages, crossings, the curved route that avoided houses, when his cell buzzed with Erin's name. "Go," he answered. Her words came fast. Frantic 911 just dropped. Caller reports screaming man dragged uphill near Old Lookout Washout. Dispatch upgraded to possible abduction. Pike's mobilizing volunteers as search support. They're staging at mile 41 now. Wade was already pulling on boots. That call's bait. I know, but command doesn't care. They finally have the magic words. Possible victim. They'll flood the corridor in 10 minutes. He looked at June, then away. I can't leave her long. Can you move? Yeah. Then listen, if that animal's still favoring left leg, it'll use the upper traverse above the washout. Same route you mapped. If they push from below with lights, it gets pinned against the slide face. Pinned. A wounded thing with no exit and rifles below. He had seen that equation before with elk, with men, with fire itself. It never ended clean. Outside, engines growled in the distance, more than 2, maybe 6. Through trees he caught strobing white beams climbing where no traffic should be. Erin said, I'm coming from Calder side. I don't have sanction and my duty weapon's locked, but I've still got radio access for now. Meet me at the old fire gate. Wade grabbed his keys, then stopped at Lorna's photo above the sink. For one beat, he was back in that other night, phone in hand, waiting for help that came late and wrong. Not again, he said to the empty kitchen. He set water and blankets by June, checked her bandage once more, and killed the cabin lights. On the porch he could see the ridgeline pulsing with moving headlamps and handheld spots, sweeping back and forth like a prison break search. As he started the Tacoma, a distant shot cracked through mist. Then another, closer. By the time he reached the track mouth, Erin's SUV slid in from the county road and braked hard beside him. She jumped out, face pale, jaw set, rain already needling her hair flat. Above them, in the dark timber of the lookout corridor, voices shouted over engines, overlapping and panicked. The mountain had tipped. Erin didn't wait for another shot. She grabbed Wade by the sleeve and pointed up the spur where beams jittered through fog. 2 groups, she said. One on the road, one already on the upper traverse. If they cross-light each other, somebody dies. Wade nodded once. Wash out first. They drove as far as the locked fire gate, left both vehicles crooked and went up on foot. Mud sucked at their boots. The old road had slumped on the outside edge, and every 20 yards water crossed it in slick ribbons. Voices carried down through timber, excited, overlapping. Not command voice, just men amped on fear. Halfway up, Erin stopped and keyed her handheld. Dispatch, Unit Vale requesting all units hold below mile marker 42. Repeat, hold below 42. Possible geohazard active. No reply. She tried again on tack. Static. Then a click, and Lieutenant Pike's voice, sharp and irritated. Vale, you're out of service. Clear this channel. Negative, Erin shot back. You have civilians with rifles above an unstable washout. You are not in command. Then somebody be. A rifle cracked above them, then 2 more fast from different angles. Wade's pace changed from careful to urgent. Move. They reached the last bend before the washout and saw the whole bad geometry at once. Below, 4 trucks idled nose to tail on the spur, headlights raking the slope. 6, maybe 8 volunteers were spread in a ragged skirmish line above the road cut, lights sweeping uphill. On the opposite side, 2 men had climbed too high and were silhouetted against fog, pointing down into a narrow bowl of alder and shattered basalt. In that bowl, pinned between a fresh slide face and a drop into deadfall, stood the creature. It looked bigger than in Erin's Bodycam frame and more hurt. Left leg held stiff, hair clotted dark along the thigh, chest heaving. It turned in place each time a beam hit it, not attacking, just trying to find space where there wasn't any. One volunteer shouted, "There, there!" and shouldered his rifle. Wade stepped out onto the open cut bank before he could think himself out of it. "Muzzles down," he roared. The voice came back from years on Fireline, command not request. Heads snapped toward him. Pike, 30 yards downslope in a county jacket, recognized him and swore. "Preston, get off this scene." The volunteer ignored both and kept aiming. Erin moved before Wade did, charging down 2 slick steps and slamming the rifle barrel upward with her forearm. The shot went into fog. "Finger off trigger," she barked, inches from his face. "You just flagged 3 people," he shoved back. "It almost took a man." "What man?" Erin snapped. "Name him." No answer, just panting and anger. Pike climbed toward them, red-faced. "Vale, stand down, or I'll put you in cuffs. Preston, you discharge tonight. You're done." Wade hadn't yet. He looked past Pike to the slope above the creature. Fresh tension cracks were opening in the mud lip, thin black lines filling with water. One more round into that bank and half the hillside could peel. He raised his rifle, turned 90 degrees away from everyone, and fired twice into a dead snag over the road. Splinters burst. Engines went quiet. "Active slide risk," he bellowed. "Everybody down slope now. Drop elevation 30 feet and hold." Pike pointed at him, sputtering. "You don't give orders here." Erin keyed her radio and cut straight through him, voice clipped with procedural precision. "All units, all volunteers, this is Deputy Vale declaring geohazard evacuation code Echo Red for Lookout Spur Corridor. Echo Red, immediate withdrawal to hardpack staging. Repeat, immediate withdrawal. Any unit remaining in zone accepts liability." One of the deputies by the trucks yelled up, "Did she say Echo Red?" Another answered, "She did. Move." The phrase did what argument couldn't. People began backing down, cursing, slipping, dragging each other by sleeves. Liability language got through where compassion didn't. Pike grabbed Erin's arm. "You just falsified a code." She held his stare. "You can write me up when no one is buried." Above them, the creature shifted, tested the slide face, then flinched as gravel skated loose. Trapped. Wade shrugged out of his pack and dropped to one knee in the open. From inside, he pulled the canvas sack he'd thrown together at the cabin when the call came. 2 salt blocks, gauze, oxytetracycline vials wrapped in cloth, syringe kit, and a bottle of clean water. Livestock medicine, crude and maybe useless, but something. Erin hissed, "Wade, no." "Only way it moves is if it chooses." He set the sack on a flat stone 10 yards from the bowl, then backed away slow, palms out, rifle slung behind him. Every eye still on the slope had to read the same message. Not a charge, not bait, not pursuit. The creature watched him, nostrils flaring. Fog streamed around its shoulders. For a long beat, it didn't move. Then it stepped forward once, then again, weight careful on the bad leg. It reached with one long arm, hooked the sack by the strap, and lifted it. Not rushed, not panicked. Pike started to raise his sidearm. Erin saw it and drove her shoulder into him hard enough to spin him off balance. "Don't," she said through clenched teeth. "Not one more round." Pike hit muddy ground, furious. "You are finished." Maybe, Erin thought. She didn't move. The creature held the bag against its torso, looked once at Wade, an unreadable, steady look, and then turned uphill into a seam of alder where fog was thickest. 3 limping strides and it was gone, absorbed by timber like it had never been there. A second later, part of the upper lip sloughed off where it had stood. Mud and rock hissed down into the bowl in a short, ugly cascade. No one fired. For a moment, the only sound was engines idling below and men breathing too hard in cold air. Wade let out air he hadn't realized he was holding. Erin's hands were shaking, but she kept them at her sides where no one could call it fear. Pike pushed himself up, mud to the elbow, eyes bright with rage and humiliation. "Both of you," he said, voice low now, dangerous. "You just obstructed a possible homicide scene and assisted an unknown threat. I can charge that." Wade looked at the fresh slide scar, then at Pike. "Charge gravity first. It almost did your job for you." Pike did not fold. He doubled down. At staging, under white floodlights and the smell of wet diesel, he took statements himself and steered everyone. "To confirm," he said to each volunteer, "you heard screams consistent with a human male before visual contact, correct?" Most nodded because they wanted their fear to mean something. One said, "Could have been a cougar, maybe." Pike wrote anyway. When Erin tried to file an incident supplement about unauthorized armed civilians, Pike snapped his notebook shut. "You are administrative hold, you don't file." She held the pen tighter. "Then log my verbal. No confirmed human victim, no body, no blood trail consistent with abduction. Subject retreated when given corridor." He smiled thinly. "Subject was never confirmed. It was on my Bodycam." "Your camera was surrendered." Wade stood by his truck with mud to his knees and listened as Pike moved from spin to threat like changing hats. The deputy who had first answered June's shooting kept glancing away, uncomfortable but silent. Kramer arrived late, took one look at Pike's face and stayed out of the line of fire. Pike finally turned on Wade. "Hand over your rifle." "Why?" "Discharge in active operation." Wade passed it butt first. Safety on. Pike took it like confiscation and immediate victory. Then Erin spoke, calm and clear. "Lieutenant, before you get too invested, you should know I recorded your TAC channel authorization of trusted volunteers entering closed timber yesterday, plus your stand-down orders when I called in armed riders." Pike stared at her. "You don't have access." "I had enough." "You're bluffing." Erin met his eyes without blinking. "Try me." He stepped closer. "You leak departmental comms and I'll bury you under felony counts." She gave a small, tired shrug. "Maybe, but you can't unsend a file." For the first time, he looked uncertain. Just a flicker, then gone. "Get off my scene." They did, not because he won, but because there was nothing left to do there except feed his narrative. Back at Wade's cabin, dawn bled grey over fir tops. June lifted her head when they came in, tail thumping once, weak but alive. Erin knelt, checked the bandage, redid tape with hands steadier than they'd been on the mountain. Wade stood at the sink, staring at Lorna's photo while the kettle came up. "He'll write this as a failed rescue," Wade said. "Unknown suspect, brave volunteers, reckless deputy, unstable old man." Erin sat back on her heels. "Then we make sure his version doesn't get to be the only one." From inside her rain shell, she pulled the thumb drive. "I kept a copy the night at your table," she said. "Raw file, metadata intact. Tonight I add my written statement, your logs, photos of June, and radio captures." "Send to who?" "State Wildlife, Attorney General Intake, 2 reporters who hate each other enough to verify independently, and 1 cloud release that goes public if the first 3 get buried." Wade poured coffee into chipped mugs. "That'll burn your badge." Erin took the mug, held it with both hands for warmth. "Badge already burned when they told me to rewrite what I saw." He sat across from her. "This is your career." She looked toward the window where first light showed the scar of the cut fence, the shattered pane patched with plastic. "Career doing what? Managing rumors while men shoot through occupied windows?" He had no answer that wasn't surrender. They worked all morning. Erin typed until her wrists cramped, stopping only to ask Wade for exact times from memory. Wade rebuilt his stolen map from scratch, labeling camera locations and civilian ingress routes in block letters. He scanned journal pages with weather notes and track measurements. Erin attached chain of custody notes and hash values for the Bodycam file, like she was building a case for court, not the internet. By noon, she hit send on 6 encrypted packages from the one corner of the porch that held a stubborn signal. At 12:07, nothing happened. At 12:40, still nothing. At 1:13, her phone lit with an unknown number from Olympia. She answered on speaker. "This is Special Agent Mara Kells, State Public Integrity. Deputy Vale?" Erin straightened. "Yes." "We received a media packet and corroborating evidence regarding potential suppression of public safety footage and unauthorized armed civilian deployment. Do not alter or delete any originals. Are you in immediate danger?" Erin glanced at Wade. "Not immediate." "Good. We are issuing preservation notices to your department now." She ended the call and exhaled slow. Wade asked, "That it?" "No," Erin said. "That's the first crack." The backlash came by evening. Pike called 3 times, left one voicemail that began measured and ended with an open threat about consequences. Then a department-wide message pinged. Deputy Erin Vale suspended pending internal review for gross insubordination and unauthorized disclosure. She read it, set the phone face down, and went back to changing June's dressing. 3 days later, at 6:02 a.m., the crack became a break. Wade was splitting cedar in the yard when his old radio, usually tuned to weather, was overridden by a local talk host shouting, "If you haven't seen this yet, pull over because this is not a bear, folks." Erin burst out the cabin door barefoot, phone in hand. "It's out." The clip played everywhere at once. Grainy, shaky, unmistakable. The moment in alders where the creature stepped into view with deer over its arm. The breath pluming in cold air. Wade lowering his rifle. Erin whispering, "Tell me my camera got that." By 9, satellite trucks were parked in Calder. By noon, the sheriff's office posted a statement so carefully neutral it might as well have been written by attorneys in another state. The department is aware of footage depicting an unidentified large primate-like subject in remote timber. There is currently no evidence linking this subject to missing persons cases. Public is advised to avoid vigilantism and remain on marked roads. No apology. No mention of dismissed calls. But patrol maps changed that afternoon. Wade heard it from Kramer himself, who came to return the confiscated rifle without meeting his eyes for long. "Upper corridor is restricted now," Kramer said. "State requested no contact zone." "State requested," Wade repeated. Kramer nodded once. "For what it's worth, about that first call. We should have taken it straight." Wade accepted the rifle. "Yeah." Kramer shifted, then added quietly, "Pike's on leave." He walked back to his cruiser in rain that had finally softened from needles to mist. The county commission hearing was standing room only. Wade sat at a folding table under fluorescent hum while cameras watched for spectacle and got plain speech instead. "I am not here as a believer," he said into the mic. "I'm here as a witness. The animal we observed had opportunities to engage and did not. It retreated when given room. The dangerous behavior in this incident came from armed civilians and delayed command decisions, not from the subject." "Someone in back," muttered Bigfoot, hugger. The chair banged a gavel. Erin testified after him, uniform replaced by a plain blazer, suspension still active. She read from her notes without drama. Timestamps, stand-down orders, unauthorized volunteers, suppression requests. Facts one after another like stakes driven in wet ground. By the end of that week, volunteer hunt pages that had been loud and swaggering went quiet or private. No missing person case had surfaced. The screaming man caller was traced to a prepaid phone, purchased with cash, and never found again. The antagonist had not confessed. He had been outlogged, out-recorded, and outlasted. 2 nights after the hearing, the mountain gave them clear weather for the first time in weeks. Stars hung over the ridge like ice chips. Erin came up the porch steps carrying groceries and a duffel, paused at the door, and didn't go in right away. Wade looked up from June's bed by the stove. "You planning to camp out there?" She gave a nervous half smile. "Wanted to ask before I assume." "Ask what?" She lifted the duffel slightly. "If I can stay a few nights. My apartment address leaked. Somebody spray-painted Ape Cop on my door." Jesus. "Landlord says he can't guarantee tenant compatibility." She made air quotes, which is polite for, "Please leave." Wade took the bag from her hand and set it inside. "You don't ask for shelter twice here." When she stepped in, she stood awkwardly in the kitchen like she was entering a church she didn't know the rules for. Wade set water to boil, handed her the old blue mug that had become hers by repetition, and leaned against the counter. For a while they talked about practical things because practical things were safer. June's wound granulation. State investigators requesting full device images. Whitlow's running out of coffee because reporters bought everything. Then the quiet stretched, and Erin stared into her mug and said, "I keep waiting for the part where I wake up and I'm just the rookie who made a dumb call." "You didn't make a dumb call." "I made a costly one." Wade sat across from her. "Costly and wrong aren't synonyms." She laughed once, brittle. "You always talk like that." "Only when avoiding feelings." That got a real laugh out of her, and then, to his surprise, tears. She scrubbed at them, annoyed with herself. "Sorry. Don't be." She shook her head. "I'm not crying about the trolls. I can handle trolls. I'm crying because when those guys started shooting on the ridge, I thought, this is where somebody dies and I'll spend 10 years writing reports that nobody reads." Wade looked at his hands, scarred and broad, resting useless on the table for once. "When Lorna collapsed, I called and watched the clock and learned what it feels like when systems run on policy instead of urgency. After that, I decided the safest way to live was alone. Nobody to fail. Nobody to lose." Erin listened without moving. "I told myself that was strength," he said. "Really, it was fear with good manners." She took a breath. "Wade, I care about you. Not just because of what happened out there before that. The way you notice things. The way you didn't let me lie to myself. I care, and it scares me because caring is leverage the world can use." He met her eyes. "I care about you too." She gave a shaky smile. That sounded like a weather report. He looked down, then back up, choosing honesty over polish. "All right, here it is plain. I think about whether you made it home when your truck leaves this road. I listen for your knock when wind hits the porch. When you didn't answer last night for 2 hours, I walked out to the propane tank 3 times for signal like an idiot. I am 61 and grumpy, and I still talk to my dead wife's photograph some mornings. And I am telling you, I don't want to do this life without you in it." Erin's mouth trembled at the edges. "Thank you." He added, quieter. "I don't know what shape that takes. I know the years between us. I know the town will have opinions." "Town always has opinions." She reached across and covered his hand with hers. "I'm not asking for labels tonight. I'm asking if we can choose each other on purpose. Not by crisis, not by accident." Wade turned his hand under hers and laced their fingers. "Yes." She stood, came around the table and leaned down. The kiss was gentle and brief and real, tasting of coffee and cold air. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his. "For the record," she whispered, "I did wait for your knock too." He smiled, the tired kind that still reaches the eyes. "Good." June huffed from her bed as if objecting to being left out. Erin laughed and knelt to scratch her ears. "Deal," she said to the dog. "You get first claim." Later, when the stove burned low, Wade taped a new photo beside Lorna's over the sink. Erin on the porch in rain gear, hair plastered flat, holding up a recovered camera strap like a trophy and flipping him off for taking the picture. Lorna's faded smile on one side, Erin's fierce grin on the other. Loss and continuation, not replacement. Before turning in, Erin touched the edge of Lorna's photograph and said softly, "I'm going to take care of him." Wade heard it from the doorway and didn't pretend he hadn't. Winter came hard and clean. On a blue morning in January, Wade was outside before first light again, Mall rising and falling. Cedar split clean, Fir argued. Larch twisted and punished if you rushed it. Some things stayed true. Behind him, the cabin door opened and Erin stepped out in wool cap and his oversized gloves, carrying 2 mugs that smoked in the cold. She set one on the stump without comment and took over stacking while he split. The rhythm between them practiced now. Below, Highway 12 flashed occasional headlights through trees. Patrols no longer crawled the upper spur at night. State had posted permanent geohazard closure signs at the washout and rerouted response maps around the no-contact zone. It was called that in official language, No Contact Wildlife Corridor. Not admission exactly, not denial either. Erin's suspension ended with a reprimand and transfer offer she declined. She took a position with a joint county-state field unit that did exactly what she wanted in the first place. Evidence, terrain, prevention before panic. Kramer stayed on patrol and, once, left a sack of venison trim at Wade's gate with no note. Pike resigned before the integrity inquiry closed. Nobody in town said resigned without adding a version of pushed. At noon, the school bus climbed the grade and gave 2 short horn taps as it passed Wade's road. The driver, Marisol, leaned out the window and waved. Wade waved back. That evening, after fence checks and water filtering and journal notes in block letters, Wade walked to the edge of porch light and stopped. Something lay just beyond the glow, at the start of the old ridgeline path he no longer used. He crouched. Deer bones cleaned by weather, arranged in a neat stack, spine lengths parallel, leg bones crossed on top, skull set facing downslope. Not random scatter, deliberate placement. Erin came up beside him, hands in coat pockets. Again. "Third this winter," he said. She looked into the dark timber where the path disappeared. "You think it's thanks?" Wade considered, listening to jays settle and the river's low winter roll. "I think it's acknowledgement." He stood, took Erin's hand, and together they stepped back from the path, leaving the bones where they were. Inside, he wrote the day's final note in the Greenfield Journal. Temp 24 degrees Fahrenheit. High pressure. Wind north-northeast light. Bone stack present at ridge edge. No disturbance to corridor. He closed the book, set it on the table and turned off the kitchen light. In the window reflection he could see himself and Erin side by side. June curled at their feet. The mountain beyond them black and enormous and no longer empty. Outside in the country they all survived by, something moved once in the trees and kept going.